Hello and welcome to another Overlord Lore video, and today we are going to take a look at something that has played always a major role in the plot of Overlord, but sadly has received far too little screen time in the anime: the armies of the Empire of Baharut. So today I am going to change that, and will shed some light on the legions, and explain more of its laws, its units, and its strategies. But before I do so, I say thank you very much to my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as thank you to all users of the YouTube Thanks function who made one-time donations. Now with that said, we are going to start from the very basis, the very nature of this army, its doctrine, and how it compares to the army of the Kingdom of Riestais. And as mentioned before, the Imperial army is almost the exact opposite of the Kingdom's army, while the Kingdom relies on peasants pressed into military service and led by individual lords of their home domain, supported by elite units or personal bodyguards of retired adventurers, and of course the king's own warrior elite on Targazev, and basically anything else they can scrap together. The Kingdom's elite forces nonetheless should probably be somewhat between 10,000 and 20,000 strong. And of course any nation under military stress can develop quite deep pockets and hire mercenaries and other elite units, for example that of Brain Anglaus's former mercenary brigade, in order to prop up the defense. But still a deficit in quality remains, that is then compensated by the sheer quantity of a fully mobilized peasantry. On the day of the last annual war, Riestais marched an army of 250,000 strong on the Katz Plain, but the kingdom's 260,000 troops were confronted by only 60,000 men, or by 6 of the 8 imperial legions. And right here the difference in doctrine becomes clear, and even how the respective doctrines of the empire and the kingdom have formed. While the kingdom is protected by natural features, aka 2 high mountain ranges to the east and the south, and the sea on its western and northern side, and its only 2 land borders, its only 2 major land borders anyway, are either a small stretch of land covered in thick dense forest, or guarded by the triple-walled, highly militarized fortress city of Irantel. And since the only other place where enemies can enter the kingdom is the very small fortified and narrow stretch of land between the Holy Kingdom, the Kingdom of Riestais, and the demi-human domain of the Iberian Hills, the Adventurer Guild, who as mentioned is an independent military, supranational entity that normally would remain neutral in any and all interstate conflicts, becomes available if the threat is demi-human in nature. Therefore the kingdom can basically secure its southwestern border with money and mercenaries alone, instead of troops of their very own, and therefore also save any cost a standing army or a large professional military would incur. Furthermore, this area right here is also the land where the Marquis Blum Rouge has his holdings, and he is one of the high nobles, and one with a fable for the military. And he even created his own elite warrior troop, which is several thousand men strong, and could be supported by more peasant levies, and of course, the Adventurer Guild itself, if a particularly large demi-human incursion would occur. The Empire by comparison is much more vulnerable, and while the kingdom during its long periods of peace simply didn't want to afford the permanent cost of a standing army, and instead could rely on peasants and its excellent geography for defense alone. Doing the same was, at least from the Empire's perspective, a military and also financial suicide. Surrounded by open fields to the east, the sea to the north, the Azalesian mountains, its forests and swamps to the west, and finally another open plain, the Katz Plain, to the south, the Empire had to continuously struggle for its very existence. If the Empire would have employed a peasant levy system, it would have had to continuously mobilize its peasants every other year, or maybe even several times in a single year, in order to protect itself. This would greatly stress, if not outright break the backbone of its economy, and with a large peasant formation, which would be necessary for the defense since the individual peasant doesn't know how to fight all that much. They not only can't sow, plow or harvest crops, but they in return will now require food and other supplies. It wouldn't even be surprising to me if this problem the empire has with mobilizing its peasant levies as a defense army is the very reason for why the empire in turn employs this very strategy of continued declaration of annual wars on the Kingdom of Rhea's ties in the hope that its economy would soon enough fall apart under the constant stress of peasant mobilization that they now have to go through. Instead, the empire, especially under Jerknev, had evolved to employ a standing army, or legions as they called. The army is 80,000 men strong, and each legion is a single autonomous army, capable of completely independent operation, as well as a combined operation with other legions. And since the empire faces threats from 2 to 3 sides, this independence allows the legion to respond to multiple threats without either straining the economy or the logistic. And since the threats are much more frequent due to the empire's geography, the legions aren't likely idling as much as a standing army in the kingdom would have to. And since these are professional soldiers called knights, they are way more effective and have way higher morale and by far better equipment than the peasant levies of the kingdom. Furthermore, since there's a continuous need for more knights, since even if combat doesn't take out all that many men, aging and therefore discharge will also require an effective system in place to continuously train and supply more fresh and young knights to its armies. And here's the thing, even if no enemies are at the border, chances are that in this very dangerous world, there's always some internal threat the Adventurer Guild would be more than happy to take care of. But here's the thing, an adventurer troop usually consists of only 4 members, and even several adventurers, while being incredibly strong and able to take out demi-human and heteromorph settlements with comparable ease. They are not an army. They are small elite units, capable of being dispatched to destroy whatever is in need of being destroyed, but they can't hold and pacify territory for longer periods of time. They don't even compare to the power of a 10,000 man strong legion, which consists of several thousand knights, mounted knights, a spellcaster corps, and an air force. That's right, they have an air force that is either attached to or part of the legion itself. It can basically pacify even larger demi-human held regions or even burn down smaller forests, which in Overlord are a refuge for all kinds of potential threats to humanity, thus taking care of a threat once and for all. And since the peasants can be sure that they won't be pressed into military service, and that they are comparably safe, they can focus on the harvest, thus creating more food security. And while the 80,000 men are, of course, continuously costing more than, let's say, 80,000 peasant levies, they still consume less food, and a legion of just 10,000 units is by far easier to arm and supply than an army of 260,000 men. If we factor in the lack of economic disruption and the higher amount of internal safety, alongside the way smaller logistics that are required to keep this unit fighting and fed, the cost should be surprisingly low for such a professional force. The adventurers themselves in turn, now being faced with a shortage of quests, and thereby without much of the same income that their friends and their colleagues in the Kingdom of Rhea's ties would have, now have to take far lower paying quests and therefore have far lower social status than, for example, in the kingdom. And even there they are not welcome but just tolerated, since even there any non-state or non-noble entity with this much military might will always be viewed with fear and suspicion. The adventurers as well as the unofficial ones, called workers, are therefore oftentimes reduced to grunt work, slaying the undead that are wandering too close to the wooden fortress on the Cuts Plain that the Empire has erected, for example, or other such repetitive and more menial tasks. And since monster defense now falls largely within the expected tasks of the Legion, who have already been paid, the Empire, or rather the various quest issuers within, will save out on all of the fees and payments the Adventurer Guild would have otherwise received, while the Legion will gain valuable combat experience. And that's why the military of both nations is so very different. And you know, a fantasy world is well crafted if the difference in military doctrine can be not only easily explained by its geography, history, and the sheer difference in expected tasks and threats, but when the very thoughts that these characters in the fantasy universe must have had that would have led to these difference in military doctrine are themselves used as weapons against the enemy. And with yet another lore video done, I say thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to Bad Guy Yi, Ben C, Chrissy, Crowley0221, Sia, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Dystopia II, Feral Shivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Hustler, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, Chromius, Legendarius, Lelouch Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Mervek, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantom, Personage, Primus 11, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Ted, Texas Deer, the Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, and Zonegon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.